You're sitting in a bank office, and the banker across the desk keeps calling you sir, in a tone he's never used with you before. Your account balance just crossed 7 figures for the first time in your family's entire recorded history. Not your history, your family's. Your grandparents worked the land or the line. Your parents worked overtime just to keep the lights on. And now you're the one signing paperwork that would make either of them cry, and you don't know whether it's from pride or fear. Here's the part nobody warns you about. The money is the easy part. What's hard is that you have no map. Old money has 3 generations of lawyers, habits, and dinner table conversations teaching them exactly what to do with a number like this. You have none of that. You are statistically an outlier standing in a room built for people who inherited the blueprint, and you're expected to just figure it out alone, in real time, while everyone around you assumes you already know. This is what it actually feels like to be the first person in your family's history to build real wealth. Not the highlight reel, not the humble brag interview. The actual disorienting, lonely, occasionally terrifying experience of it. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why it feels this way, why it's more common than you think, and why so much of it quietly disappears within a generation or two if nobody tells you the truth about it first. If a video that actually says the quiet part out loud is worth 15 minutes of your time, hitting subscribe means you don't miss the next one, and it genuinely helps. Here's the first thing worth knowing. You are not as rare as it feels. Among the world's billionaires tracked by Forbes, roughly 67% are self-made. They built the fortune themselves in their own lifetime, rather than inheriting it. In the United States specifically, that number climbs to about 69%. Only a minority of the wealthiest people alive got there because someone handed it to them. Zoom out from billionaires to everyday self-made wealth, and the pattern holds even more strongly. Multiple independent studies, including Northwestern Mutual's most recent research on American millionaires, put the self-made share at around 79%. People who describe their own wealth as built, not inherited, with only about 12% attributing it to inheritance and a small remainder to a windfall like a lawsuit or a lottery ticket. Put plainly, the overwhelming majority of wealth in America right now is first generation. You are the rule, not the exception. But here's the number that should actually make you sit up. In 2025 alone, 106 people crossed the billion-dollar threshold for the first time, entirely self-made, adding a combined $386.5 billion in new wealth. The strongest year for new self-made billionaires since 2021. Every single one of them woke up one ordinary morning as the first person in their family's history to be in that room. None of them had the map either. The one place this flips entirely is gender. Among female billionaires globally, roughly 3 out of every 4 inherited their fortune rather than building it. A strikingly different pattern than the overall numbers, and a reminder that self-made access to capital has historically not been distributed evenly, even at the very top. There's a term for what you're actually experiencing, and almost nobody who's living through it has ever heard it. Journalist Alfred Lubrano, in his book Limbo, calls it being a straddler. Someone raised in one class who crosses over into another, usually through education or a career, and ends up belonging fully to neither. You're not blue collar anymore. You're also not old money. You're standing in the doorway between 2 worlds, and the door doesn't close behind you the way anyone promised it would. This shows up in specific, almost embarrassing ways nobody talks about out loud. You still glance at the price before ordering. You feel a flash of guilt buying something nice, like you're supposed to apologize for it to someone. You go home for the holidays and there's a new kind of distance at the table. Not because your family loves you less, but because you now carry a frame of reference they've never had to live inside. And there's no way to shrink yourself back down to fit the old seat without it feeling like a small betrayal of who you used to be. And it cuts both ways. In rooms full of people who inherited their money, you're often the only person who remembers what a shut-off notice looks like, what it's like to do math in a grocery store aisle. And that memory doesn't fade just because your bank balance changed. You're fluent in 2 languages now and completely native in neither. Nobody warns you that the money solves exactly one problem. It was never the only problem you had. The disorientation you're feeling actually has a clinical name, coined by psychologists Stephen Goldbart and Joan DeForia at the Money, Meaning, and Choices Institute back in the 1990s. Sudden wealth syndrome. It's not a formal diagnosis in any medical manual, but it describes something very real. The specific bundle of anxiety, guilt, and identity confusion that shows up when a person's financial reality changes faster than their sense of self can keep up with it. The documented symptoms read almost uncomfortably like a checklist of things you felt and never said out loud. Recurrent, intrusive thoughts about money that won't quiet down. Anxiety that spikes with every market headline, even when your actual number is fine. A strange, disproportionate guilt that creeps in and quietly sabotages decisions you know are reasonable. And underneath all of it, a confusion about identity. Not knowing anymore which version of you is the real one, the person who grew up counting change, or the person who just wired 6 figures without blinking. Researchers who study this describe people moving through stages that look a lot like grief. First comes the honeymoon, a rush of feeling powerful, untouchable, like you finally outran the thing that used to scare you. Then comes what they call wealth acceptance, where that same feeling of power gets tangled up with a new, quieter fear. The realization that you now have something to lose, and no instruction manual for how to protect it. Nobody warns you about that second stage. Everyone only ever shows you the first one. Here's the part that should actually worry you more than the confusion. Building this is statistically the easy half. Keeping it and passing it forward is where almost everyone fails. A widely cited study by the wealth consultancy Williams Group found that 70% of wealthy families lose their fortune by the second generation, and 90% lose it entirely by the third. It's worth being honest about that number's limits. It comes from an early 2000s study focused on family communication, not a rigorous audit of every family balance sheet in history. And some researchers have pushed back on treating it as an iron law. But even with that caveat, the underlying pattern shows up again and again in real families. The money you build with your own hands rarely survives, unchanged, into your grandchildren's hands. The reason isn't stupidity. It's that you built something old money already has and rarely has to think about. The actual skill of holding wealth, not just making it. Old money grows up watching how a trust works, how a family meeting about money is supposed to go, what questions to ask a lawyer before signing anything. You're building all of that from zero, in your own generation, usually alone, usually while still recovering from sudden wealth syndrome from 2 sections ago. If a video like this, one that actually tells you what happens after the number goes up, instead of just celebrating that it did, is useful to you. Subscribing helps more first-generation people find this before they need it the hard way. And I'd genuinely appreciate it. Here's what the research actually shows once you strip away the Instagram version of wealth. Most self-made millionaires don't look anything like what you'd expect. Thomas Stanley and William Danko's landmark research, published in The Millionaire Next Door, found that the typical American millionaire lives in a normal, unremarkable house, drives a used car, and never buys anything to prove a point to anyone. The wealth is real. The performance of wealth is almost entirely absent, because when you built it yourself, you remember exactly what it cost to build down to the hour. That's the actual behavioral fingerprint of first-generation money, and it's the opposite of how inherited wealth usually behaves. Someone who grew up around money often relaxes into it because, to them, it was always simply the water they swam in. You don't relax into it the same way because some part of you is still running the old math in the background, still doing the mental subtraction every time you spend, still half expecting the number to disappear if you stop watching it closely enough. This isn't a flaw. It's actually the exact mechanism that made you good at building wealth in the first place. And it's the same mechanism that, left unchecked, quietly turns into the anxiety from 2 sections ago. The skill that got you here and the fear that follows you here are, uncomfortably, the same instinct wearing 2 different faces. Here's the detail buried inside that Williams Group research that almost nobody repeats when they cite the scary number. The study wasn't actually about bad investments or reckless spending. It was about communication. The families that lost everything by the 2nd and 3rd generation weren't necessarily worse with money. They were worse at talking about it. Nobody sat the next generation down and explained where it came from, what it cost, or what it was actually for. The fortune got transferred. The meaning behind it didn't, which means the thing that's supposed to make you feel behind, the fact that you have no map, no family precedent, no old money script to follow, might actually be the one advantage old money doesn't have. You know exactly what this cost. You remember the shutoff notice, the grocery store math, the 7-figure moment that made the banker change his tone. If you're honest about that story instead of hiding it, instead of trying to perform old money you never had, you're not the weak link in the generational chain. You're the first person in it who actually has the information required to break the pattern on purpose. The Straddler discomfort doesn't fully go away. The anxiety from sudden wealth syndrome doesn't fully go away either. But both of those things are survivable, and neither one predicts whether the money lasts. What predicts it is whether you say the real story out loud to the people coming after you, instead of quietly letting them think the money simply always existed. Go back to that banker's office from the beginning of this video, the one calling you sir, in a tone he's never used before. That moment isn't actually the achievement everyone tells you it is. It's the starting line. Everything before it, the grocery store math, the shutoff notices, the version of you that used to flinch at a price tag, that was the hard part, and you already survived it. Everything after it is a different kind of hard, one nobody hands you a manual for because you're the first person in your family's history who's ever needed one. You are not broken for feeling disoriented in a room built for people who inherited the blueprint. You're not behind for still doing the mental math, still feeling that flash of guilt, still catching yourself glancing at the price. That instinct is the exact thing that got you into that office in the first place. The only real danger isn't the discomfort itself. It's staying silent about where the money came from. Letting the next generation grow up thinking it simply always existed, and quietly becoming the statistic instead of the exception. You don't need old money script. You need to write the first page of a new one, honestly, out loud, for whoever comes after you. And if you want to see exactly what happens on the other side of this story, what it actually looks like when the wealth isn't built but inherited, when the next generation grows up already fluent in a language you're still learning. Watch our episode on every level of a trust fund. It picks up almost exactly where this one leaves off.